Could the Baltimore Ravens being underdogs be a good thing? We talk about that and much more next year on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Ravens. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire. Of course, we're here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. We're free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube. And we're back, Locked On Ravens After Dark Part 2. For those that don't know, if you're not in the Maryland-Baltimore area, there was a storm a couple days ago, a pretty big one, not knocked out a lot of power in a lot of places. Here included, so I've been without power for a couple days almost now. And, I say very limited power, and I look a little tan today in the video. I think the limited power is getting a bit weaker, but we press on here for Locked On Ravens. No loss of power. Limited power is going to stop me, at least for now, for putting out this show. We're dedicated here Monday through Friday talking Ravens, and we have a lot to talk about today. I mean, a lot to talk about today. We're going to do our mailbag here today. 2 segments of questions talking about the Ravens being underdogs, stability at the center position, and some more. But in the first segment, yeah, there was some Ravens drama, I guess. Lamar Jackson drama. So we're going to talk about what Lamar Jackson's exchange on Twitter with Bernard Pollard was, that whole situation, because wow, it came out of nowhere. It was just like I was hanging out, not really doing much, and then all of a sudden you just see Lamar Jackson tweet. I'm like, okay, hold on. So we're going to talk about that here today. We're also going to do it in the virtual background phase again, since there is very limited power here. There's only a select number of areas I can actually record this show right now. So we're doing the virtual background. The lighting works better with it, although again, the lighting is seems a little weird today, but regardless, we're going to be talking Ravens all 3 segments here today. So before we get into everything, be sure to follow us on YouTube. That means subscribe to the channel. If you're new or returning even, like this video as well. And if you haven't subscribed yet and you're wondering why you should, we do put out daily Ravens content 5 days per week. So whether you want opinions or news or analysis or anything relating to the team, up to date at that, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, we are here for you. And if you've already subscribed, thank you so much for doing that. I really do appreciate that. Our next goal, 3,000. Yeah, 3,000 subs. A big number, but I'm confident we can get there because we hit 1,000, we hit 2,000. We're on the come up here on Locked On Ravens. So thank you. And also in audio form, thank you for listening as well. I really appreciate that. And also follow me on Twitter at Castrick34, Locked On Ravens account at Locked On Ravens, the whole 9 yards. But let's talk about this whole Lamar Jackson, Bernard Pollard. Heated discussion, I would say. So pretty much long story short, last night, Lamar Jackson, I think, caught wind of a couple of things Bernard Pollard was saying about him and decided to respond. Now, this wasn't your ordinary, let's say it's just like, oh, the athlete responds and that's it. This was a string of tweets by both Lamar Jackson and Bernard Pollard, and it got heated. Pretty much, Bernard Pollard said no top wide receiver will ever come to Baltimore while Lamar Jackson is there. This, that, and the other. Lamar Jackson is good, but he's not able to make the throws. And Lamar Jackson responds and says, you've been capping since I've been playing for the Ravens. I never heard of you. You got to the Super Bowl because of Ray Lewis and Ed Reed. And then they start going back and forth a little bit. Bernard Pollard saying, make sure you call me champ. And Lamar Jackson going, never, nobody even speaks to you. I had to Google you, all this different type of stuff. Lamar Jackson has been, and we've talked about it before, over the course of his career, even going back to college at Louisville, he's been shouldered with a lot of hate. For a very unnecessary hate, I would say at that. Is he a perfect player? No, he's not. Nobody's a perfect player. But I feel like at the end of the day, Lamar Jackson is somebody who deserves respect. He's somebody who has proven himself at both the college and the pro level. And Bernard Pollard is someone who, his Ravens tenure didn't really end on a very good note. It seems like he has a lot of spitefulness towards the organization and doesn't really like John Harbaugh and a lot of different things. And so I actually, back in 2019, when I was just starting off hosting this show, I ended up talking to Bernard Pollard, just on Twitter. We exchanged a couple tweets about the Ravens. I think the Ravens had just lost to Kansas City in 2019. It was literally like a couple weeks after I took over the show. And so I saw Bernard Pollard talking to other fans, I think. And so me with my 200 followers, I'm like, oh, let me go at Bernard Pollard and talk to him. So I said, hey, Bernard, how do you think the Ravens can do this year? I think I said, how far can they go in the playoffs? And he said, I think they can go far, but they have to beat good defenses. Kansas City, not a good defense. And then he started talking about Lamar Jackson a little bit. And then he started engaging with other fans as well. And it really turned into a discussion of like Lamar Jackson this, Lamar Jackson that. And that was my first time remembering him saying something like that. And maybe it was because I was involved in it, but I remember, it was a lot of like him disagreeing. I said, this is only his second year. He'll be able to bounce back and this, that. And he's like, I disagree. So this has been, Bernard Pollard has been hating on Lamar Jackson for upwards of 4 years now. Like it's been probably close to 3 to 4 years since, at least I assume, he's been hating on Lamar Jackson. And it's been constant, I'd say. Like people are pretty aware to the fact that Bernard Pollard is a Lamar Jackson hater, doesn't like the Ravens organization. Like it is very out there. So Lamar Jackson was like a hero to a lot of people last night, kind of putting Bernard Pollard in his place. And, Bernard Pollard was talking about how he'd like light Lamar Jackson up, and Lamar Jackson saying, you could never tackle me, this, that, and the other. And it was actually pretty like crazy overall. But look, I give athletes a ton of credit. I have a lot of respect for them for dealing with the hate that they do get on a general basis. Now, it's not just Lamar Jackson. A lot of athletes, if not every single athlete at the pro level, does deal with some sort of hate directed towards them. Now, with Lamar Jackson, obviously, it is a lot more than the average athlete. I think Lamar Jackson is one of the most, if not the most, disrespected athlete in all of sports, based off of the hate that he gets on social media. And look, for the most part, he's been somebody who doesn't really respond to it. He's talked about just blocking out the noise and letting his play do the talking. But every once in a while, like, look, athletes are humans, right? Athletes are people just like you and me. They have feelings, they have emotions. They're not just, robots that go out on the field, play, leave the field, and that's it. Like they are humans. They have emotions. So if somebody was talking all this stuff to you and, it's consistent and you were still getting a ton of hate, would you sit there and take it for years and years and years and years? Now, obviously, with an athlete doing it, it is like there have been plenty of athletes who have responded to tweets of hate, and maybe it's one tweet or something, and the highest of profile athletes have done it. I would say Lamar Jackson's one of the highest profile athletes in sports right now. We've seen LeBron James do it. We've seen a lot of players do it. But I think this was the first time in at least a while, and maybe I'm forgetting something. If I am, you can remind me. But I think this is the first time in a while that we've seen a consistent string of tweets, like Twitter beef. I'm sure there has been recently. I'm probably just forgetting. But this was a pretty big example of that, where look, Lamar Jackson, he showed that, yeah, you know what, I can sit there and I can take the hate, but at the same time, he's going to defend himself too, right? That's something that he's probably saying to himself, where, at the end of the day, is he going to respond to every single message he gets this hate? And, you can't do this, you can't do that, you're never going to win a Super Bowl. He's not going to respond to every message, right? He probably sees a lot of them, maybe some, maybe none, maybe all. I don't know. But this was a very big story last night because, again, it's this high-profile athlete coming for a former player who won a Super Bowl with the team. And Pollard was somebody who, I mean, he was decent in Baltimore. Like, he was fine. He wasn't like this face that everybody's going to remember and be like, oh, this guy was absolutely key, like a key rotation player in the secondary, right? He was all right, He had a couple of big hits and everything. I'm not saying he was an atrocious player, but he wasn't like this all-star, this Pro Bowl or anything. So the fact that, again, he's created a lot of drama with the Ravens in the past, this is not his first rodeo, stirring up controversy with the Ravens, with Ravens fans, with players of the Ravens. He's done it before, and it's been pretty consistent. So all of that is going to build up, And then I think Lamar Jackson kind of just took all of it, and I think a lot of people's feelings too, and just kind of let it all out, which, you know what? Good for Lamar Jackson. Good for him. I know some people are saying you just sit there and take it, don't respond. Why is this? This is a bad image. No, it's not. I don't think it affects his image at all. It's, he's somebody who, again, has sat there for so long and taken so much with the occasional response here and there. I'm not going to discredit him or, say negative things about him because he took to Twitter to defend himself one night. It's Twitter drama. Like, at the end of the day, the news cycle is going to move on rather quickly. I feel like maybe it'll pop back up in questioning during some of the training camp days, but this is something where I think Lamar Jackson ended up ended up taking a stand for himself. And that's something that I personally think that is a pretty noble thing to do. I mean, he was somebody who could have just sat there and taken it. And for the most part, a lot of athletes do that. But every once in a while, when you see those high profile athletes kind of come out of the bushes a little bit and say, hey, I see what you're saying. You're not right. And here's why you're wrong. It's kind of like, oh, okay. Like he really means that. Like, all right, cool. So it was actually kind of interesting to see him say that stuff and kind of get into a full-fledged almost Twitter beef with Bernard Pollard. And I think a lot of people have wanted to see that for a while, especially going towards Bernard Pollard. He was attacked by a lot of people last night, Jackson included. So again, the news cycle will probably gloss over it in the next couple of days and be like, all right, that happened. Like, let's move on. But I think this did show that Lamar Jackson, he has a chip on his shoulder. He's somebody who is not going to just take everything that's thrown in his direction, especially like from a former player. Like, I think, when you have fans talking, right, when it's fans, it's a little different, but this is a former player who has just consistently directed negative energy towards Lamar Jackson. And, maybe he just decided, what, I'm fed up. This is what I'm going to do. I don't want to speak for him or anything. Maybe he was joking. Maybe he wasn't. Like, I don't want to put words in his mouth because he obviously hasn't talked about it. But it was a very fiery night on Twitter for the Ravens flock, definitely based off of everything that happened last night on Twitter, because you don't really expect to see something like that, but when you do, I don't know. I think it shows a little bit of fire, which I think is good. But we'll head into our first break now. When we get back here on Locked On Ravens, we'll be diving into some mailbag questions, talking about if the Ravens being underdogs is a good thing. So be sure to stay tuned. Still to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. First, though, I do want to tell you a bit about Dave. And for Dave, there's a lot of hindsight that you could have. Maybe hindsight's 2020 for you, and you can't really change the past. But what if now you could get a little help from your future self? Maybe you'd have to borrow a little cash, but now you actually can do that with Dave. And Dave is the banking app that can help you get up to $500 instantly with extra cash. That's more money to fill your tank, buy a wedding gift, or catch up on bills. You can finally tackle those expenses that have been stressing you out with any hangups, and there's no interest or no credit card check needed also. And millions of people have already downloaded the Dave app to get financial relief they need with extra cash. So if you're in a pinch and need some extra help, download the Dave app and think of it as a helping from the future you. So download the Dave app from the App Store right now. That's DAVE. Sign up for an extra cash account and get up to $500 instantly. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Instant transfer fees apply. Banking provided by Evolve, member FDIC. The future you will thank you. We're back. Our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still here with you. And again, thank you so much for making Locked On Ravens your first listen to the day. Again, we're free and available on all platforms, so be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube. Follow us in audio form. It greatly helps me out a lot. So thank you so much for all the support. But let's now dive into a couple mailbag questions. We'll do two more segments. A lot of Ravens talk still to come here, but let's first start off with two questions from Afi DeFoy, who says, hi, Kevin. Lamar out of the top 10 quarterbacks, our O-line 2, our roster ranked 12. Do you think being seen as underdogs could be a source of motivation? Thanks again for your work and have a nice day. Well, thank you. You have a nice day too. And I mean, really, what you're looking at with this Ravens team, and I talked about it, when was it? It was like a couple months ago or something. I started talking about, all right, well, have the Ravens been forgotten? Almost. Like, is this a forgotten team? A team that has had so much success, especially under Lamar Jackson, historical success since the franchise entered the league in 1996. The Ravens, especially for, it feels like this upcoming 2022 year, it feels like they are underdogs. It feels like they have been forgotten. Now, last year was a year that was not great. They finished 8-9, had a ton of injuries, but they have improved their roster in free agency. They have improved it through the draft. They have guys coming back from injury. Guys they've had off seasons to better their games, get in better physical shape. It just feels like with all the moves that happen in the AFC, plus the Ravens down year, people are counting them out. Now, I know a lot of people also believe in them, right? There have been people who are saying, watch out for the Ravens. This team is dangerous, right? There are Ravens believers. I don't want to discredit those people. But there is a lot of, and what we've all seen is the Bengals are going to win the North, and, the Broncos got better at Russell Wilson, and the Chargers with all these different players like J.C. Jackson and Khalil Mack, and then what are the Patriots going to do? You can never count them out. Obviously, with Pittsburgh, even though Roethlisberger's gone, you can't count Tomlin out. What's Deshaun Watson going to do in Cleveland? I mean, you can look to the AFC South, the Colts now with Matt Ryan. People are talking about, can the Jaguars win the AFC South even? It's kind of all this different conversation. but there's been limited conversation, I'd say, surrounding the Ravens and saying, is this a bounce back team? There has been some. Again, I don't want to say it's been completely like they're in the dark and nothing's been said about them positively, because there's been a lot of positive talk about them. But I think the Ravens do operate better as underdogs. I don't think they operate badly as favored teams, but especially like going back to the Joe Flacco era. I know we're not there anymore, but you would always see these Ravens team making the wild card or making a slight run at the division and then going in the playoffs and just dominating teams, whether it was 1 or 2 or going and winning the Super Bowl, right? That was a team where in that 2012-2013 playoff run, they beat the Colts with Andrew Luck, who had a great year that year. They beat Denver in Denver with Peyton Manning, that number 1 seeded Denver team that had a trio of amazing receivers, a very solid defense. Then they go into New England and beat Tom Brady. People were calling that Ray's retirement party, right? Remember that? It was all like, oh, this is the end of Ray Lewis's football career because Brady's going to beat him. They beat them. Then in San Francisco, it was actually, I can't remember exactly. It was pretty split. I think the Ravens might have been in favor. I honestly can't remember. But then they get out to that huge lead. The power goes out and just everything. So they have operated very well as an underdog. And, people can say what they want about, oh, Lamar Jackson's not a top 10 quarterback. The Ravens roster isn't a top 10 roster, right? Whatever. But for, again, like me who covers the team, you who watches the team, even if you don't watch the team, you can look at the roster on paper and say, all right, this is a very good team when everybody's healthy. Like J.K. Dobbins back full strength, Gus Edwards back full strength. For people who watch the team and have more of an eye on the team, they understand what went wrong last year. I think people understand that even when Lamar Jackson missed the back half of the season, those last couple games, the Ravens were hanging with teams like the Rams, who won the Super Bowl, the Packers, who were a absolute beast of a team last year, a Pittsburgh team that made the playoffs. They were hanging with these teams, 1-score games, 1-point games. Like imagine if Lamar Jackson was healthy or Ronnie Stanley was healthy or Marcus Peters, right? If they just had one play go their way or the ball bounce one other way, things would be very different. We could have been talking about a team that made the playoffs. Instead, we're talking about the team that missed the playoffs for the first time since 2017. So many other teams improving, but the Ravens also improved. Like they signed Marcus Williams, they signed Morgan Moses, they drafted Kyle Hamilton and Tyler Linderbaum and all these other depth pieces. David Ajabo, if he comes back, would be huge. Travis Jones, all these pieces. So it's not like the Ravens stayed still while everybody improved. A lot of teams improved. There are going to be a lot of competitive teams in the AFC, like a lot of competitive teams. But at the same time, the Ravens are going to be one of them. I think that they just get counted out because it is a what have you done for me lately league. And what have the Ravens done lately? They didn't make the playoffs. So that is what people see. Lamar Jackson, not a top 10 quarterback in some people's eyes. What has he done lately? Struggled in the back half of the season after a very good start to the year. People just discredit that for some reason. I don't understand why. But didn't have a strong back half of the year, gets injured, and that's that. So people are going to – but it's weird because then Deshaun Watson's number – I don't know. Regardless, I think that with this Ravens team, I think it is definitely okay that they're underdogs. I think they obviously could operate better that way. We haven't really seen it a ton in the Lamar Jackson era. They have had a target on their back ever since Lamar Jackson's rookie season, especially after the 2019 season. I wouldn't say it as much after his rookie year because I know a lot of the questions coming out of his rookie season were stuff like, can he take the next step? Is he going to be able to actually throw the ball effectively? And what did he do? He won the second ever unanimous MVP. So after that season, there has definitely been oh wow, we have to play the Ravens stuff. We have to bring our A game for them. That's something that has been going around for a couple years, but maybe that's laxed off a little bit. I don't think it will be. I think other NFL teams understand and respect the Ravens, but I think that it is totally okay. They're underdogs. I honestly think it benefits them a little bit. The Ravens, they move in silence sometimes, and sometimes that silence can be deadly. So I think that for the Ravens, it is okay that they're underdogs, most definitely. But our last question here from Afida Foy is also, I read that the NFL would like flag football to be an Olympic sport. How great would a dream team be? That's an interesting, I would like that personally. The issue is getting people to play it. Like, obviously, if you were to say, oh, we're playing NFL football in the Olympics, one, I know that they're trying to, like we talked a bit about with the international audience, they're trying to up their international audience. So obviously this at least would help it. But it's a matter of, again, getting guys to go over. You're not going to play a full tackle game of football in the Olympics. I don't think guys would, or at least a lot of guys would risk their bodies over that. Plus, I think when you're doing that, like, you don't have a lot of countries that have like pro football teams, right? Like, it's American football, right? It's not like every single country has a team like that. So maybe if enough countries had like flag football teams, they could definitely do it. And I think it would help the increase the national audience of the NFL. But I think they're gradually taking steps to that. And it would be interesting. I definitely wouldn't be opposed to it, but it's just a matter of getting that actually to go through with the, I'd say, limited international audience that the sport already has. It's not like there are no international fans, like there are a lot of them, but I think they just have to increase that, get the excitement up, which I think they're trying to do really, really, really hard. So if that ends up continuing and they kind of continue to push that, maybe we will see flag football eventually. But that's an interesting point there. That was a fun little question. So thank you. But now we're going to be talking about more mailbag questions in our final segment. We still have a lot to talk about center position and a lot more. So be sure to stay tuned still as I'm going to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. We're back. Our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still here with you. And again, thank you so much for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. Be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube. Follow us in audio form. Be sure to make your second listen Locked On NFL, where we talk all things NFL all week over there. I host the Monday show, so if you want to check that out, please do so. I'd really appreciate that. And so we'll talk here, more Ravens talk with the virtual background era. So again, like if my hair is acting a little weird in the screen, that's why. So it's a virtual background because the lighting works better. But let's now talk about some more mailbag questions. We'll start off with two from Be More Finest, who has just a couple comments listed off here, so I'll read them. He goes, asking for patience for wide receiver group. I do believe we got some talent. Yes, talent at wide receiver and got very lucky with undrafted class. I'm excited to see for self at training camp this group. Dark horse is Bridges for me. How exciting is it to finally have our center spot clear? No longer upset they didn't pay Bozeman over Skura and he left. Anyone joining this happy train I'm driving to finally be happy about having a center? So, all right, let's go down the list. We'll talk about center last. So patience for the wide receiver group. Yes, I agree. I don't think the Ravens should necessarily make any rash decisions on like adding a high priced veteran. Like if they added Julio Jones tomorrow, I'd be okay with it. And I have said I would be okay with it because it's not like you're investing 3 years, $40 million. It'd be a 1-year deal, most likely, maybe 2 at the very most. And that gives them a veteran presence, but they do actually have a lot of talent. Like I think that the whole thing that a lot of people are concerned about is they don't have a lot of experience. Like they're not DeAndre Hopkins, they're not Stephon Diggs, they're not those top flight receivers. So they're wondering, when will Lamar Jackson ever get that top flight receiver? Well, he might have one in Rashad Bateman. Like I think Rashad Bateman has the tools to be a number one guy, but these guys all do need experience. So when people are saying, well, they need the experience, they're not going to get the experience if they don't play. So that's one thing. Is this the best receiving group in the league? No, it's not. Now, I think they have potential, even though these guys aren't necessarily household names in every single household. Obviously, Bateman's going to have a huge role. Devin Duvernay, James Prochet, Tylan Wallace, and the undrafted class, as Be More Finest talks about. There are a lot of talents there. I like Shamar Bridges a lot. I think you could also see some contributions from Mekhi Polk. There are others as well, but they really they had a type almost. It felt like the big-bodied 6'2", 6'3", 6'4" guy. Slade Bolden isn't really that. He's another undrafted guy from Alabama. He's really good, but maybe just a tad redundant. So yeah, just all those different players I think could have a shot to make the 53-man roster, especially if the Ravens do keep just 5 wide receivers, which I think they will do. I think it'll end up being 5 personally. So whether that is, the 4 I talked about and then Bridges, or the 4 I talked about, maybe like even another guy who's not an undrafted receiver. So Benjamin Victor, Jalen Moore, they have those types of players. So I'm interested to see what they do there. And also he talks about the center position. So we'll talk about the center position a little bit. Yeah, the Bradley Bozeman situation was one that still is it's an interesting one. Didn't get a lot of money from Carolina. Just felt like the Ravens might have just offered him an extension. He didn't accept it and they said, all right, that's it. I don't really know though. But I do think now with the center position, definitely there's not a question mark there. I know when Patrick McCary signed that extension, a lot of people thought it was going to be for all right, he's going to be a super 6th offensive lineman. He's going to play a really important role with injuries or when they need a plug-and-play guy or just a 6th offensive lineman. But then Bozeman leaves. They don't sign another center. And all of a sudden, it's like, all right, Patrick McCary's penciled in as the starting center. But then Linderbaum is there at 25 when they make all their trades and everything, trading away Marquise Brown and trading 23 for 25 and another pick. And they decided to take him. And I think for Linderbaum, he's a player that, again, like one of the best center prospects to come out in years, right? He's gotten a little flack for the size, the arm length. But again, I don't hold that against players as much as other people do. I think if you can play, you can play. And we've seen that before. But at the end of the day, now that the Ravens don't have a question mark, like Linderbaum should be the starter week 1. I wouldn't be shocked if the Ravens decide to maybe, I don't know, put either Patrick McCarry or Tristan Colon as the number one center to start training camp and have him like earn it, but then he does earn it and stuff just for like having a veteran start the year as a number one center. I wouldn't be shocked if the initial depth chart says that, but I'd be pretty shocked if Linderbaum didn't start week one just because of his prowess, his high profile in college, and I think what he will show throughout training camp and the preseason. But it is nice. It is nice. I know a lot of people wanted Creed Humphrey in last draft, and obviously he goes to Kansas City, turns into one of the best centers in the league in a very short time. The Ravens didn't have a second rounder to work with though after the Orlando Brown trade. Well, speaking of Orlando Brown, he is looking for a lot of money. He wants left tackle money. The Chiefs are looking to pay him right tackle money, it feels like. So the Ravens don't have to deal with that right now, but that's a trade the Ravens got enough way out of. They got a couple other players. So, yeah, I mean, the presence of Brown not being there definitely hurt, but the money is something the Chiefs are going to have to figure out. But regardless, getting back to center, the two consistent positions last year on the line, and we talked about this yesterday, was center with Bradley Bozeman and right guard with Kevin Zeitler. I think having Kevin Zeitler next to Tyler Linderbaum is going to be absolutely massive. Linderbaum's somebody who I think can really benefit from having a veteran like Zeitler there, because again, you're looking at it from the center position can be a very hard one to start out with, especially if you're a rookie. Like some guys, and again, Creed Humphrey, transition pretty simple. But maybe some of the bigger defensive tackles will give Linderbaum problems, and Zeitler can come over and help with that, maybe chip a little bit. We'll see what the Ravens end up doing with him. But I think that having that veteran presence next to Linderbaum is going to help out a ton. So I'm really excited. I'm really excited for that group. I think that the Ravens have a lot of depth there. You even can talk about Tristan Colon, who I think that might maybe be on the outside looking in, depending on how the Ravens decide to work their roster, maybe a trade candidate. So yeah, we'll see what the Ravens do there, but I am excited for the center position, and I'm excited for Linderbaum. Hopefully he's able to do a lot of good things during his rookie season. But finally, let's talk about a question here from Wise Beyond My Years, who says, "Hey, Kevin, first off, you're doing a great job. Now, I'm of the mindset this roster isn't complete yet, specifically wide receiver / rush end, because Bowser and Ajabo won't be back till likely October and beyond at wide receiver. It's Bateman, and that's it. So I'm still saying bring on JPP and or Julio, you say." Well, first of all, thank you for the kind words. I appreciate those. And in terms of the roster not being complete yet, I still technically agree. Like I said, what was it, last week? I had the conversation on one of my shows that was, is the roster complete? And I said no, especially because Justin Houston's still out there. Now that Justin Houston has signed, it kind of brings up the question again: is the Ravens roster complete? I think it is more likely now that it is. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if the Ravens just decided to go into training camp with what they have. Like, there's only a couple weeks before training camp. But the interesting part about it is that you can never account for, or you can only do so much, I'd say, to account for injuries, much like we saw for the Ravens last year. So if there's a wide receiver that goes down and the Ravens really need a veteran, I think Julio Jones is definitely somebody I would sign. I would sign him anyway. But again, the Ravens, I think, want to give their young wide receivers a chance. On the edge front, you don't really know with Bowser and Ajabo right now. Like, it definitely could be October. I'm no doctor, so I don't want to put out medical information I don't know about. But I do think that there is a shot they can be back for week one. I'd call it medium unlikely to unlikely. I mean, it doesn't feel like Ajabo would be ready by that point, especially after he suffered his injury in March, whereas Bowser suffered his in January. So you can look at the timelines a little bit, medical advancements. Like, Bowser looks good, posted a video and he looks good. But at the same time, I think you also have to look at it from the perspective of they don't want to rush their guys back. So if Bowser and Ajabo aren't ready, the Ravens know Pierre-Paul. They had him in the building. I think that would be fine for them, especially if they decide, hey, we're not really sure how this guy's going to respond or that guy's going to respond, or can Dalen Hayes play a full season because he was injured for a lot of the rookie years. So I think the two most likely options at this point, if you're looking for a player that the Ravens would probably bring in, maybe a 1-year deal, potentially again 2 if they want to make the money work and shuffle it around a little bit, would be Julio Jones, a wide receiver, and Jason Pierre-Paul at edge. Pierre-Paul can also play inside on the D-line, but they have a lot of D-line depth, so I don't think that's a necessary thing. But I do think when you look at the roster right now, the weakest positions on it are wide receiver and edge. Now, edge becomes a bit more of a strength when Bowser and Ajabo are factored in, but we just don't know if they're going to be yet. So you have to look at it from that perspective and say, well, do they want to take the absolute safe route and say, well, we're going to sign everybody we can, get as much as we can in here? Or do they want to draft or look to the draft and say, yeah, you know what? We just got guys in this draft 3 years ago, 2 years ago that we want to see. And they have undrafted guys as well, wide receiver. They have some really good undrafted guys at outside linebacker too. So maybe those guys don't pan out, and all of a sudden there will be an actual need. Like, I'm not saying there's not one now, but like the Ravens feel like there's an actual need for a veteran wide receiver or a veteran edge guy. But for now, the Ravens could be done for a little bit. Maybe they do add Julio. Maybe they do add Jason Pierre-Paul, but I wouldn't expect too many more additions. Maybe they surprise me and do something and I'm wrong, but I do think Julio Jones would benefit the Ravens still. But I think, again, if they don't sign him and they roll with their guys, they will be okay. That's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. When we get back here tomorrow, maybe it'll be another Locked On Ravens After Dark. Who knows? We'll stay tuned here and we'll talk more Ravens tomorrow. So be sure to stay tuned for that. And I will see you right back here tomorrow.